And welcome to another session of the 11th Annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference. It's presented by Northeastern State University. We have sessions today and all through the day tomorrow. I'm Bob Hales. I'm your moderator. As a reminder, all of our sessions are closed captioned. To view the captions, simply click on the closed caption icon on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Today's session is Order, Work, Energize Yourself and Your Students. We have with us Catherine Porter, who's an Associate Professor of Mathematics, has taught at St. Martin's University for 20 years. Her specialization is numerical, linear, algebra, and statistics. Okay, I probably flunked the minute I walk in that classroom. And then Mary Jo Hartman is also an associate professor of biology and has taught at St. Martin's University for 15 years. Her specialization is marine biology. And both of them have emphasized pedagogy recently. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Catherine and Mary Jo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming to our session. We all have experienced times when we get maybe a little bored. Hopefully it's not the whole semester, but it may be those moments when no one is doing anything, they're staring straight ahead, or we feel the lack of energy in the room. So in the past few years, we've tried to engage more activities and different things to help energize both ourselves so that we have the motivation and want to continue and try and get the students to light up and get engaged in the classroom and make them also like the subjects that we're teaching. As Bob said a minute ago, we're having a little issue here. Whoops. I'm going to go ahead and let us introduce ourselves a little bit.
Hi, I'm Mary Jo Hartman. I teach biology. I'm trained as a marine biologist. I've been teaching at various levels since 1986, and as Bob said, I've been here at St. Martin's University for 15 years.
And I'm Catherine Porter, and as Bob said, I've been here for 20 years, but I've been teaching in the classroom, unfortunately, even a little bit longer, since 1983. So we know our material fairly well at this point. Granted, there are new developments that come and get engaged, or that engage us, and we want to engage the students. But it's looking at different ways to try and talk about different things and get the students energized and want to learn. So first, if we want to let you know where we are, because many of you probably do not know Lacey, Washington, or even St. Martin's for that matter. Lacey, Washington is near the capital of the state, near Olympia, Washington. Actually, if you cross one street into the other, you end up in Olympia. So we're within an hour and a half of the Pacific Ocean, about an hour and a half of the Cascade Mountains that run next to us with all the volcanoes, things like Mount Rainier that is pictured down here, as well as Cascade Mountains, or the Olympic Mountains that are on the peninsula. The Cascades have Mount Rainier. And so you can see here, we're from the Evergreen State. We have a lot of students that like to stay in our area. So one of the things is these are local students. We have a good reputation with helping students who may not achieve elsewhere. So we have, as Mary Jo will talk about in a minute, a variety of different students, but then some of our students also go work at the Capitol, as you can see, the Capitol being Olympia, Washington.
St. Martin's University is a Catholic Benedictine university. It is a liberal arts university. We have about 1,200 students on campus with a variety of majors. We have an engineering program, business program, education program, and then our arts and sciences. We're celebrating our 125th year at St. Martin's. It is a St. Martin's Abbey and University, and as you can see in the lower left of this screen, we have monks that live on campus in the Abbey. Some monks teach courses, some monks work in administrative duties, and they are an active part of our campus and a major part of our campus. The campus is on about 500 acres of dominated by pine trees, so very wooded area. We have a seasonal stream on campus that I use in many of my courses to do some sampling. We also have a couple of ponds to deal with a lot of the rain that we get here in Lacey, Washington. Our students, as Catherine mentioned, are very diverse. Generally, our class sizes range from about 7 to 30 students. We have about 35% of our students are first generation students. First generation meaning they may be the very first person in their family to go to college, or they may be following a brother or sister that's gone to college, but their parents did not attend college. And because of that, there is a fairly high trepidation for many of our students who are leery about what does being in college mean and what does that mean to be successful. So I think the topics that we talk about today are also ways to help those students build community within the classroom, feel like they can ask questions of their peers and also of the instructor, rather than being just a straight lecture style all the time. We also have a very diverse student population in terms of race and ethnicity. About 40% of our students identify as non-white, so an incredibly diverse student body, sadly not quite as diverse in terms of faculty, but we're working on that. Biology is one of the top majors in the College of Arts and Science, so we have many, many students. You can see in the lower left here, we have a botany lab in one of our general biology classes for the freshmen, and that's about a normal size of a lab, about 24 students in the lab. Math is the main service program. Every student on campus, of course, has to take a math class, but we also have engineering program and all of the sciences, and so we have many students that are taking math classes for that. You can see in the upper right, students are doing an activity in a math class. So doing some small group activities. Generally, the courses that I teach and that I use, many of these things that we're going to talk about, I teach a general biology for freshmen. The majors have to take a year of general bio. I also teach environmental science course. We have an environmental studies majors that all environmental studies majors need to take this course, but also many non-majors decide that this is a lab science course that they take because we also require that all students on campus have to take a lab science. I teach an invertebrate zoology course, a marine biology, general ecology, and a biostatistics course, and I've used these things in all of those courses.
Now, Bob may have indicated that I am a background in numerical linear algebra, but that is not a course that we teach at our small university. And here are some of the courses that I do spend quite a bit of my time teaching. I also have the background in statistics, so I've been able to further that and also help people through some of these different courses for like even actuarial science and so forth. One of the things that I want to talk about for a minute is the rationale, and then we'll start getting into the ideas. Students and resources have changed. All of us have seen this. What we expect from a student and what we're showing them how to do things. I mean, they didn't have the calculators they do now when we were students. And I think there's still a great deal of value in terms of talking about mathematics for being able to get them to use and get through ideas without the calculator. There's also a great advantage to being able to use those. But part of it is in terms of expectations that we have. I think of the way I used to study math or study any topic for that matter, where I would spend the time when the instructor gave me something that I knew I needed to figure out. You'd spend a little time, you might read a little bit more in the book and do a little bit more. The internet has changed that drastically. And unfortunately, trying to make sure the students learn the material in the same depth that I did when I was doing it the old-fashioned way is sometimes a challenge. So that's part of what we're trying to do with some of our different ideas.
Also, I think it's true for anybody that's been in the classroom, whether it's been 2 years, 5 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. There comes times when we maybe get a little tired of teaching the same things in the same way. And I think certainly the students feed off of that. And you can walk by classrooms and just feel that there's not a lot of energy. And of course, we all have this happen at certain moments. But part of what Catherine and I started talking about is how can we get more energized and excited about things that we've been teaching for, 20 plus years? And how can we then also translate that to our students? And so a lot of the things we tried in our classrooms was because we were seeing that the students were maybe not as engaged as we want them to be. And we thought, well, wait, we need to figure out a way to change that. Also, when that classroom is lacking energy from both sides of the desk, the instructor and the students, we know that the teaching motivation is diminished. You may not be excited about going in the classroom. You may not be excited about the new material you're going to be covering. And again, I believe that translates immediately over to the students. They are not motivated because they can see that you're not excited about the material, and their motivation to learn the material is definitely diminished.
So to help with this, what we'd like you to do for a couple minutes is think of some difficult concepts. Okay, these might be concepts or topics that are difficult for the students to grasp, or a challenge for you to teach them. And we'll give you a couple ideas.
So one of the concepts that's especially difficult for the freshman biology majors is in population genetics. We cover it in the second semester of the course, and it is specifically used in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. There's some basic algebra that's used, but the concepts of alleles and genotypes and then calculating these things is always difficult. We struggle with teaching it in the lab. We struggle with teaching in the lecture. We try all kinds of hands-on activities, but it is still a concept that students have a tough time with. And so we're continually trying new ways. This last semester, actually just a couple weeks ago, we expanded the lab and went across 2 different lab periods, 2 different weeks, to try to do more in-depth and giving them more opportunities to work on problems to help them with this and do more hands-on activities. So that's one that I have.
And one that I think about a lot is things where you need to estimate the results. And part of this is I want my students to understand the concept well enough so that they can give a good idea of what the answer should be before they start the calculation. Something simple like if I said multiply 12 by 9, I mean, this is one that we should be able to do. Granted, some of us a little faster than others nowadays, but knowing that it's around 10 times 10 or 100. So if they were doing this, and especially when we start adding technology, that if they put something into the calculator or the computer and they got an answer of 1,000 instead of 100, they should at least be alerted that something's wrong. And a different example that I always have troubles with in this estimation idea is called Chevyshev's theorem. And it's a theorem in statistics used to try and give you an idea of what probability will be. It gives you a range of values, and all you know from the distribution is its mean and variance. So you're trying to just say, given this little bit of information, you have no idea the shape of the curve or what's going on, what should the probability be in a certain range of values? And but how do I calculate it? How do I do this work? And it's like, there is no calculation. This is the estimation process. So these are where the challenges come. So right now, before we go into the topics and the different methods that we want to introduce today, we'd like you to spend a couple of minutes, or maybe 30 seconds is more like it, to think about something that you might have a challenge with your students, or your students have a challenge with, that might be something that we could help employ. And maybe share these ideas in the chat. So we'll give you a couple seconds here, 30 seconds, to try and come up with something. Hopefully our brains are thinking, because I don't see anything typing. And I know until you see the ideas, that might be a challenge. So let's go ahead and show you some of the ideas.
So this is Mary Jo, and in my biology classes, I've tried some things like taking the game Jeopardy and changing it a little bit and using it in my classes for reviews and for quizzes. And I'll give an example of using that. I also went to a teaching conference and got the idea of using poetry in some of your classes to help students think about concepts and topics in a different way. So I've had students write haikus, and also I have a book that I use on invertebrates And that there were examples of doing Dear Abby kind of things and Tinder ads for invertebrates. I'll give you some examples of that. Active note taking, trying to incorporate a little bit more active activity by the students when I'm lecturing and slowing me down. I'll give you some examples that I've used in my classes. And we're lucky enough to have a campus that is available for lots of outdoor activities, but also we live in an area that there's places pretty close by that we do a fair number of field trips and scavenger hunts that I incorporate. And I'll give you some examples in formal writing. So we'll go back to look at some of the things that you shared. It looks like
Breaking down syllabi.
That's one of them.
Oops.
Social psychology, theory-based. So there may be times when my students may not understand a theory, therefore I share a video. Excellent. YouTube video clips of The Devil Wears Prada. Usually I explain the theories and their differences. That's great. Thanks for those ideas.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be something else in here we can all share together. When we look at this, now for me, I have a couple different things that I've done incorporating things called a companion text, which I will show you several examples of and how I've used it, as well as some of the pros and cons. The derivative B and integral B. For those of you maybe associated or talk to colleagues in the math areas, in our Calc 1 class, the students, besides passing at a certain percentage level, has to also pass an exam, what we call a gateway exam on derivatives. 10 derivatives that they have to work through, show the process, and get to the final answer. Derivative B is slightly different than that, but we work with the math club to sponsor this outside class time. They provide pizza and prizes for the students both in the class, and we also invite all students on campus to be able to come in so that they can try to also compete. So there's two categories. In the Calc 2 class, we have an integral B, same way, and this helps the student practice, especially under a time constraint, because the gateway exam, those 10 problems have to be done in 30 minutes. Online homework problems are becoming standard place almost in a lot of courses anymore. What I do when I'm teaching, especially pre-calculus and calculus, is it's great that they can do the online homework because they get immediate responses, but I make them turn in the work because for me, how they get to the answer, knowing the process, looking at the strategy is way more important than just they got the answer right. So for example, on homework that my classes are doing right now, they're getting a half a point in WebAssign, our online homework system that goes with our calculus textbook, but then I'm giving anywhere from 3 to 5 points for what work they turn in. Grading the work and the process is a lot faster when they've already known whether they got it right or wrong, and problems that a lot of them have difficulty with, I also bring into class, and they get 5 attempts online for the answer. I've done a little bit of Jeopardy too, although I'll let Mary Jo talk about hers for our example today. And then the testing dice idea is where I have them look at dice that aren't the 6-sided, because we've talked about it in our statistics classes, but then they have to write a report as if they're talking to, have been hired by a casino or maybe a game board company to be able to see if the dice are fair. And so they have to go through all the theoretical work and all the other information and the actual math of the course, but then the biggest challenge is, can you express this to the layman who doesn't know what you're talking about? I'm not going to give more examples of that. I'm going to focus on the top 3. So as I look at the focus of these things, the first thing that I want to talk about is our use of a document camera. A lot of universities are starting to use these now. We were fortunate to have a professor that came to work for us about 15 years ago that introduced this to our campus, and now they're commonplace in every room. You can kind of see me teaching. I'm writing, but I'm looking out. And where I'm looking out is at the students. You can see a couple of the students in the front here. They're looking at what my hands are projecting up, showing on the document camera on the screen. The nice part is I'm not covering material on the whiteboard, and I'm also not just showing my backside. The main part of that is I can see the students. When I know they got it, I don't have to delve and keep going over it and over it again. But when I also see I tell them if I could be that cartoon artist drawing the question marks hanging over their heads, I know that's a time when I need to stop for a minute. What did I miss? What is it that you don't understand? And so it really helps engage the class a little bit more. And I know, wait a minute, what's everybody doing? What did I say? And I remind them I'm also human. Did I make a mistake? Um, but what came from this is, as you can tell, I have stuff that is typed up there. This one is actually a loose leaf bound notebook. You can see the hole punches possibly if your screen is clear enough. And what I did was, at first I used to use a lot of handouts, time and true handouts that I used for many courses over and over and over again, and I kept reproducing them. And what I just also figured out is that students sometimes need a little bit extra explanation and words in terms of how things are expressed. So I created what I called companion text. It took a little time, and these are not things that were done overnight. I did one at a time for a course that I had the most handouts, and then gradually started to grow from year to year in what I was using because the students enjoyed them. The biggest caution, though, was how to use this. I don't want this to replace the book. Once in a while, I might have an example that is the same as the textbook, but the majority of the problems are actually ones that may be similar or different, engage in some of the wording of the homework assignments. And I also go through and talk about what does it mean in English that the book is trying to say in terms of the theory. So it's a good way to take like the idea of the person who is having issues with the theory type work, where I can write it in English, we can have more of a discussion, and I'll explain how this works. One of the things is I prepare these before the start of the semester, and our Computer Resource Center then will print them out for the students. The students will have to request one, and the most that any one of them has ever cost has been $10. Most of the time it's $6 or $7, and they can either get it loose leaf or bound. And I always tell them it's the same cost whether it's printed one side or two. And there are many times where I say do it the one-sided, because then if somebody asks an extra example or somebody does something different, I can go ahead and show them a different example on that separate side, and they don't lose the pieces of paper. So here's a couple examples of how I do it. So in the beginning of a section on probability and statistics, I took all the information from that section so they would have one reference point after we go through the material. We'd spend a few minutes talking about this, and they're not spending the time copying the information. They can listen to the conversation, they can underline. I encourage them to write their own comments next to it of something that makes sense that I said, so that it helps. And then sometimes I have summaries at the end. Different class, I might have a handout where, okay, let's talk together. We'll start the first 2 or 3 of these in unison together. And then I say, okay, work on your own, try and help your neighbors, check your answers with your neighbors. I'll walk around and answer questions so that they can see if they are doing it correctly, or if they didn't feel comfortable asking a question out loud, they can ask me separately. Similarly, then I'll start the right hand of this to get ready for the antiderivatives. What I hope to do in a lot of areas is provide them a physical worked out example that I then can make extra comments. We talk about this, why I did each piece. Under the first box here, I might say, remember our goal here now in working through what we're going to do is to find that absolute value of x minus 2. Then the idea after we've done that is then let's walk through and do this together. So then the next one we'll do step by step, what would we do next, and try to walk through the problem together. Then I'll have 2 or 3 of them where they're working on their own, try to work on it, ask your neighbor, then we'll talk about it as a group. Again, I walk around and ask questions or answer their questions, and then we do it together in the end, and I provide the solution up on the board. The nice part is they do have I can get through more examples. They're not spending all their time just writing down the information and trying to play catch up and missing all the comments that I have. So the students can engage and get further in depth in the information. They get more individual and group help by that way that I'm presenting problems and letting them share together and making sure they can do the homework before we leave the classroom. That discussion. I mean, I do discussion in all my classes, even when I didn't have this, but they were so busy copying down the problem, they didn't hear the words that I was trying to express. Or I'd ask a question and they'd say, can you ask that again once they finish copying? We really get more written down in their own writing that they can understand to figure out what's going on. And it really provides that active note taking, and especially in my freshman classes, gets them to get engaged in how to write notes. Now, some of the cons, however, is they don't always write things down themselves. So if they haven't written the formula down a couple times, they don't remember it as well. So I try to tell them that they need to do this after class. I even talk about different ways that they can practice this. And some of them then forget to read the real text. I keep reminding them, it is not replacing the textbook, and especially with the online homework, that adds to that. And it sometimes, by making them ignore that text, it makes it harder for them to understand where things are coming from. Hence, my exams always are based on the notes, the examples in the book, and I'll use exact examples in the book to try to get them engaged. Now, does anybody have any questions real quick on this companion text? We'll also have some time at the end of our session here for other questions, but if somebody has something specific, I could answer it right now. Online, when I did the online class, I've taught one of my classes online where I used this, and then I created, I used Camtasia with it, although you could also use these Zoom conferences or Zoom sessions to put up essentially little lectures. And then I would ask them to go back and forth between an example in the book, an example that I did in the video recording of kind of my lecture. It was a 300 level course, so it made it a little bit of a challenge, but it is a good idea. And chat webinars also help provide those. Yeah, that's great. Anybody else? Okay, I want to show you the idea of my derivative and integral bees. And these are ones, as I explained, where we're doing practices. So the idea, I'll just kind of briefly go through a couple examples. We go through, give the students the rules. They have to be simplified, and we're only grading the answers on this, so it's unlike what we do for our exam. And they can miss, there's 10 problems in a round. They can miss 2 in a round to go to the next round and then continue. If anybody gets interested, I can give you more information, more detailed information on the rules later. Clarification for how answers are written. Right now, we're small enough to where I'll have 2 sections of Calc 1. I'm the only one teaching it. So how I'm going to grade their gateway are the clarifications that I will use, and others will also bring in their own. And then we also just one more time clarify how we're going to do the grading. I'm just going to give a few seconds with a couple examples so you can see what we do. So we would put up in the derivative B, round 1, a problem. So here's the problem. We would tell them, you have 30 seconds. You guys can try this to see how well you think you can answer these or remember these things. But what we do is we also kind of watch them. We say 30 seconds, but if everybody's done in 20, we're done. If they're taking a little longer as the problems get harder, we'll allow them more time. We'll tell them stop, time's up, pencils down. Then I show them the answers. So they're checking to see their answers. Then we have multiple judges walking around the room, checking to see how they've done them. And we have a different sheet marking how many they've gotten wrong. And the students really get engaged. Even if they are out of a round and out of the game, we tell them to keep practicing. And for the most part, they do. They get excited and engaged in this. We'll remind them of problems like this. Here's our second problem. And here's where you would think the students who've already passed calculus would do better than the students who are in it at the time. They forget how to integrate things like 2 to the z. So it brings a challenge here. When time's up, pencils down. Again, we put the answer up and walk around the room. Now I want to show you just a couple quick ideas of how we might do the integral B. So you just see a couple of the examples in terms of what they look like. So here we have an example where hopefully straightforward. These are actually problems from one of my actual derivative B's and integral B's. So this is in Calc 2. Hopefully 30 seconds. Okay, maybe you tried it. Hopefully remember a little bit. Tell them to stop and time's up. And then we put the answer up. And then we hear this collective groan or sigh in the classroom because they forgot the plus C. And we'll tell them, okay, warning 1. You don't get a warning on your gateway tomorrow, but here's a warning. We won't mark this problem 1 or wrong. But if you do it again, we will. So then we also help remind them that some of them will have bounds on the integral. So we give them 30 seconds here. Give you a couple seconds if you want to try it. Then we'd say pencil down, time's up. I'd put the answer up, and as the students are marking things and checking things, the judges will also go around and kind of help the students that had it wrong, what they did wrong. So they're getting feedback from the different judges also in the room, and it makes it quite engaging as we go through this. I'm going to go ahead. Does anybody have any specific questions on this? Again, I'm more than happy to share with anybody. Our email was at the beginning of the presentation, and we'll have it again at the end. But if somebody has a question, I'd love to help you. Okay, not seeing anything right now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mary Jo.
So this is the Jeopardy that I use for, I've used it for both reviews in my classes. I've used it for in-class quizzes. And Catherine's going to just switch over to the presentation of the Jeopardy game so you can see how it works. I put them in teams of 3 to 5 students. I've done this with 30 students in the class. I've done something like this with 60 students in the class, and I had them in groups of 3 and then ran it a little bit differently. So it's set up like a Jeopardy board. I used this last semester in my ecology class to do as an in-class quiz. And so we'll see if you folks want to play. We'll try 1 or 2 of these. So I picked the topics that I wanted to cover in the 2 chapters that the quiz was over: mutualism, commensalism, predation, Volterra equations, and hodgepodge. And just to show you how it works, can I have somebody, first one who can type, pick a category and a monetary value, and we'll try that question. And I won't make you answer it, so all you're doing is picking. So the way I also do this, well, I've got predation, and we have, how much money do you want to try to make here under predation? And so when I do this, 200. So when we do this in class, I have each group will get a chance to, I don't let them buzz in. I used to let them buzz in, and that was crazy talk because it was way too loud. So each group will get a chance to choose one category. They choose a category like you did here. That group then gets to answer that question alone for $200. Have to write down their answer, and then I give everybody in the class also a chance to answer that question in their own groups, and they get half the amount of money. Obviously, they're not getting any money, but they're writing it down. And so there's one person in each of the groups that's sort of the secretary keeping track of the points. So let's see what the predation 200 is. So name 3 defense mechanisms used by the Texas horned lizard. Anybody? I know there's somebody from Texas that's on here. Does anybody want to take a chance at this? Horns, okay. Saliva. Feet. Okay. Let's see what the answer is. So you just click on the answer, and I list 5 different things here. So coloration as a camouflage. They puff themselves up to look bigger. They run quickly. So I'll give you for the feet, definitely. They have spines on their back. Definitely will count that as the horns on their head. And squirting blood from sacs near their eyes. So also many of them do have saliva that could be toxic. So way to go, Margie, you just won. Okay, then we go back. We have hodgepodge. Somebody said for, I can't read it, $200. Okay, let's try hodgepodge for 200. Name the invasive predator that has invaded Guam and reduced native bird populations. Don't give him a name like Frank, but if you know what that is. Anybody?
Lizard?
Mm,
Rats?
No, think something that would eat a rat. A snake, yes, somebody got it right. Snakes, the brown tree snake. Actually, they believe that it snuck onto some planes, maybe in the cargo or maybe actually in the tire part, and got transported to Guam, and they've decimated. Actually, why am I teaching you? But anyway, you can see how this leads into a lot of conversations. Students have a blast with it. Snakes on planes, yes, and we can talk about that as well. So students love doing this. I then post the entire game, which is basically a PowerPoint, into our learning management system, and they can go back and look at it. And then I've had some students also come up with their own game boards and then use it as a review of their own. So really it was collaborative, got students talking to each other about topics in your class and concepts, which is what everybody wants. And it also increased the discussion in general. And if you want to know how to get to that, I can give you information. You can email me and I can let you link you to that Jeopardy. Okay, another thing I did, I got an idea from a teaching conference that I went to about trying to use more creative assignments in classes that you may not have a lot of writing and you want to have them write more. So I thought, sure, what makes you think about poetry more than invertebrates? So in my invertebrate zoology class, I came up with an assignment of writing a haiku about any invertebrate. So mostly junior and senior biology majors are in this class, and they've been in the class. We've probably been in for 5 or 6 weeks when I did this. So we'd studied a variety of different invertebrates, lots of diagrams, information about ecology and their structures. And I thought, okay, let's try something a little bit different. So I said, we're going to write a haiku about whatever invertebrate you want to that we studied so far. And remind them that a haiku is a Japanese style of poem that follows a specific form. The haiku has 17 syllables and 3 lines. So you have a 5, 7, 5 pattern. 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second, and 5 in the last. And traditionally, the haiku is focused on images of the natural world. So it fit in really well with an invertebrate zoo class. So here's an example I grabbed from the internet. And I told students also, if you do this, you get extra points if you draw something. So this is from the internet. You can see the link at the bottom. Jellyfish swimming through the cold ocean waters, slimy, gooey, ouch. And then they've got a picture with it. So 575. So I gave this assignment, didn't know exactly how my students would approach it. And here is one of my students, both their picture and their haiku, after they talked about the sponges in the phylum Porifera. Porifera sponge, choanocytes, filter food, marine snow footing. So these were terms that we came up with and talked a lot about in our concepts that we talked about in class, but then they incorporated them in a haiku. The class then became crazy about haikus. Everything was a haiku. We would be outside doing sampling and they'd come up with a haiku for that. It just was really fun and also had them thinking about the concepts in another way. Another thing I tried,
or did you want to give them time to try?
No, is something I got from a book. And if you are interested in any kind of biology, this book is hilarious and is also completely factual in terms of the sexual or the information about invertebrate sex. The name of the book is Dr. Tatiana's Sex Advice to All Creation by Olivia Judson, and you can see it here. So from that, I got the idea of having my students write either a Dear Abby type of letter or a Tinder type of ad for an invertebrate. And that's basically what the book is written. It's written as an advice column to invertebrates. And so this is one that I took as an example directly from the book. Dear Dr. Tatiana, I'm a slime mold, Phycerium polycephalum is a name, and I don't see how I'm ever going to marry and have children. I can only ooze along, so finding partners is difficult. I haven't met one yet. Worse, whereas every other species I've ever heard of has 2 sexes, my species has 13. And you can see the asterisks. Actually, there may be more than 500 sexes. And I gathered that before you can make babies, you have to convene them all. I don't see how this is possible, and I'm worried I'm going to end up a jury old mold. Why are slime molds so oversexed? Sign, looking for a baker's dozen in the forests of Romania. So this is an example from the book that I gave to the students, and I said, many of them didn't know who Dear Abby was, so I had to kind of explain that that's an advice column. And when I mentioned Tinder type, well, their eyes lit up as in they knew what that was. So I gave them a choice. I could do either one. Here's an example from one of my students. They wrote a Dear Abby letter. I am a Scyphozoan. Some might call me a cup animal. I am a true jelly with many different species that make up who I am. I'm having an identity crisis. At the beginning of my life, I'm a planula larvae, but then I'm also a cyphosoma and an ephyra before I turn into an adult jelly with a saucer and tentacles. With so many different life stages, I sometimes second guess myself when I have both a polyp and a medusa form. Which one of these stages should I identify as? Signed, looking for my identity in the bottom of the ocean. So again, concepts and terms and vocabulary things that we had spent time looking at, and here they got to use it in a different way, and they posted them on our learning management system so other people could read them, and they also posted them on my office door because they were so proud of them. Here's another example. This is a Tinder ad for an invertebrate written by one of my students. Hi there, my name is Planaria, and I am ready for some fun. Don't let my cute eyes fool you. I can barely see. They're just eye spots, and I can only really detect light sources. So if you're ugly, I won't be able to tell. You can catch me in saltwater, freshwater ponds, or rivers, but I'm usually at the gym working on these rock-hard abs. I'm also a hermaphrodite, so I'm down to get freaky-deaky with any gender. If you want to get rough, don't worry. I can take it. I can regenerate almost anything. Let's get wild. So again, these are from college students. So get them engaged, get them excited, and they, again, posted a lot of these, and then they would also hand them out to their friends for Valentine's. So it was hilarious. This is an example of using active note-taking in my freshman biology class. So I was running into talking about a lot of different concepts, a lot of different ideas, and students were kind of getting overwhelmed. And I, as you can tell, have a tendency to talk very fast. So this got me to slow down and also got me to help them understand what was the most important things to take home. So I would make, depending on the class and what they would seem to struggle with, I would make copies of diagrams from their book. So for the far right, you can see muscle, and I would hand out those diagrams, and then we would all label the important structures together. It would get me to slow down. I'd use a docu-camera, like Catherine had shown you earlier, so I could see they're actually interacting and doing the same thing. The middle is showing the fern life cycle. So one specific group where we're struggling with the plants, they really didn't understand plant life cycles. I hadn't spent much time on it, so I made some extra copies of plant life cycles, and then we would walk through and label all of these together. Much better than just throwing it up there on a slide and expecting them to remember everything. On the far left, you can see a phylogenetic tree. We worked through this and talked about why these organisms we put together, what traits or characteristics would put them in those groups. And then the bottom left is looking at a polyphyletic, paraphyletic, and monophyletic phylogenetic trees and talking about the differences between those, and then again labeling those. Students would hand these in for points, and it also increased the chance they would be coming to class because they knew we would be doing things like this in class, and would also get them more engaged in the material. These are other examples of active note-taking in my class, again from my freshman biology class. So we have super groups of eukaryote organisms that can be overwhelming. There's so much, but we break it down on a table. I would quite often give these out and then have students work in small groups to fill out as much as they could in the table as a group. And then they would share, either sometimes have them come up and share in front of the class, or just share in their group. And then as an entire class, we put the whole thing together. You can see evolutionary history of behaviors. There's some examples there, some fungi, and also having them draw different fungi and label. So again, getting them a little bit more actively taking notes.
Oops.
So as I said, we're lucky enough to be on 500 acres of wooded area on our campus, but we also are here in the Pacific Northwest, and actually everywhere that I've taught, there are places nearby, and I try to get students out as much as I can. So on the left side, the top left and right are both from the Nisqually Wildlife Refuge, which is within 15 minutes of our campus. And I've taken students there to look at and talk about estuaries and changes that have happened to that estuary. We're also state parks. In the bottom left is a Ptolemy State Park, which is right on Puget Sound. So we're doing some marine plastic studies there. And then we have rivers that are running through our area. That's a Deschutes River that we're all at the river doing some sampling. We have a stream on campus that we sample quite a bit for both water quality, chemistry, and then also for invertebrates. So take advantage of wherever you have. In some cases, it might just be going outside and being outside in a different environment to talk about some concepts. And students see you in a different way, I think, when you are willing to maybe step outside your comfort zone. And in some cases, that means actually stepping outside the classroom.
We also have started going to more and more conferences, starting with the Teaching Professor Conference, at least for myself. Mary Jo has also been to the Lilly Conference, the Teaching for Active and Engaged Learning. And this is our first time to this transforming the teaching and learning environment. And I hope it's been a busy week this week, but I'm hoping to be able to go back and look at some of the recorded sessions to try and gain more from each other. We're all doing this. We're all trying to help the students. Sharing the ideas is a wonderful way. One of the things that we've learned with our university at Benedictine is it's a community, and we really engage in that community. In fact, one of the things that we're able to do on our community campus is we have a faculty learning community. We have people from English, education, business, engineering, math and science. I mean, everybody coming to this meets like once a month to have discussions about different ways to approach the students, different ways for them to learn, things about how to get them to understand the syllabus, to be able to pull different information out. And it's really been great. I just joined this year. Mary Jo has been in it for 2 years now.
And it was the first time when I started going to the faculty learning community here on campus. It was the first time I actually met some of my colleagues from different disciplines. Even though we're a small university, we sometimes just stay in our own building and really only see other science people or other math people. So I got to meet other people, and then we could share both successes and failures. And it was a very safe place to talk about what are you doing in your classroom, what's working, and what do you wish was working better. Because of going to the faculty learning community, I'd only been going to marine biology conferences and biology conferences my entire career. And because I started going to the faculty learning community on campus, one of the professors leading it was from education. And she wanted to know if somebody wanted to go to a conference with her and present being on a faculty learning community and talk about it at the conference. And so I volunteered to go. And that was how I started to go to these kind of conferences. And sometimes the sciences can get a little snobby about what they think is an important conference. And I think all my colleagues would benefit greatly by incorporating going to these type of conferences that you guys are engaging in right here and learning about what's going on in classrooms and what can I do to become even a better teacher.
And although we are not good at patting ourselves on the back, I'm usually looking for new things and different ways to engage and do things. We figure we must be doing something right. The monks in our college sponsor what they call the Outstanding Faculty Award. This is a copy of mine, one I got several years ago, and Mary Jo has also gotten one of these. This is nominations from the students, and they give not just the nomination, but they write a statement of why they think this person should be the winner of the award. And then it is at a Scholars Day presentation where the monks present who they have deemed should win. And they're putting up a little bit of a prize money and just honoring and putting our name on a plaque in the hall. But this also comes with information that the students had gathered, as well as then it was a faculty and staff committee that went through the nominations through all the information to help deem what really exemplifies our teaching university.
And I think it's really important that it is a recognition of the excellence in teaching. And not only the person who gets the award, but everybody that's nominated is also recognized and their names are put in programs. So I think sometimes research can push the teaching out of the way. And I think this is a way of remembering, at least at our university, teaching is primary importance.
We have a list here of some of the resources that we have used. Some of these, as Mary Jo exclaimed with the Dr. Tatiana's sex advice that she's used in some of her courses. Some of the books are ones that we've gotten through our faculty community or learning community, as well a few that we picked up when we went to the Teaching Professor Conference in the past couple of years. And at this point, we'd just like to thank everybody for being here and want to know if there's any other questions that you might have. And here's our email information also so that you do have that if you need it, or we can type it in for anybody. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? That was really great information.
Cool.
Well, I don't see any other than people saying thank you for a great presentation.
Yeah.
So let's quit while we're ahead, okay?
That sounds fine.
Sounds fine. And we appreciate it. And like we said, we truly mean it from the sharing and the communication. If there's anything anybody needs more information about, please send us an email and we will be happy to respond and share. And if you have something else that you did in one of these ideas that might help us, we'd love to hear it. Like I said, we love the sharing in the community.
Well, great. That's nice of you. Okay. Well, I'm going to stop the recording, and we've got another session.